before the world learned the shape of its continents, before maps dared to reach this far south, there was a land that drifted away and learned how to survive alone. Imagine standing on the edge of a red desert at dawn. The air is cool, almost gentle, but you know it won't last. The horizon glows softly, then ignites as the sun lifts itself from the earth. Somewhere in the distance, a kangaroo pauses mid-step. A bird you've never seen before calls out, its sound sharp and unfamiliar. Nothing here feels borrowed. Everything feels ancient. Australia does not introduce itself politely. It reveals itself slowly on its own terms. Australia is not just a country. It is a continent shaped by isolation, extremes, and time measured not in centuries, but in tens of millions of years. It is home to some of the oldest rocks on Earth, the oldest continuous human cultures, and some of the strangest and most resilient life ever to evolve. To understand Australia is to understand what happens when life is pushed to adapt again and again, with no easy way out. This story begins long before humans arrived, long before kangaroos hopped or eucalyptus trees scented the air. Around 100 million years ago, Australia was still connected to Antarctica, part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. Forests thrived where ice now dominates. Dinosaurs walked across land that would one day be scorched by sun and drought. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Australia began to drift northward. That separation changed everything. As Australia moved away from Antarctica, ocean currents shifted. The continent grew drier, rainforests retreated, vast deserts formed in the interior. Life that remained had two choices: adapt or disappear, and adapt it did in ways found nowhere else on Earth. This is why Australia feels so different. More than 80% of its mammals exist nowhere else. Marsupials, animals that carry their young in pouches, came to dominate, filling ecological roles occupied by placental mammals elsewhere. Kangaroos became grazing giants. Koalas specialized almost entirely on eucalyptus leaves, a food source toxic to most animals. The platypus, a creature so strange that early European scientists thought it was a hoax, evolved to lay eggs, sense electrical signals underwater, and blur every category biology tried to impose. Australia became a living laboratory of evolution. But this land was never empty. Archaeological evidence tells us that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have lived here for at least 65,000 years, making them the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. When the first humans arrived, Australia was even more diverse than it is today. Giant marsupials roamed the plains. Massive birds towered over the landscape. Humans adapted quickly, learning the rhythms of a harsh and unpredictable environment. They did not dominate the land, they learned it. Indigenous Australians developed deep ecological knowledge, passed down through songlines, oral maps that encoded geography, water sources, seasons, and law into stories and music. Fire was not feared but understood. Through controlled burning, landscapes were shaped to encourage new growth, manage animals, and reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires. What modern science now calls fire stick farming was practiced here for thousands of years. This relationship with the land was not symbolic. It was practical, precise, and sustainable. Then everything changed. In 1770, Captain James Cook charted the eastern coast, claiming it for Britain. Less than 2 decades later, the first fleet arrived in 1788, establishing a penal colony at Sydney Cove. To the British, Australia appeared vast, empty, and available. To the people who had lived here for millennia, it was home, deeply named, known, and sacred. Colonization was swift and devastating. Diseases spread. Land was seized. Water sources were disrupted. Indigenous populations declined catastrophically in many regions. Cultures that had survived ice ages and climate shifts now faced a threat they could not adapt away from. Yet even in the face of displacement and violence, Indigenous knowledge, language, and identity endured and continue to endure today. Meanwhile, the colony grew. Australia's early European history is often told through hardship, convicts, isolation, brutal conditions. And much of it is true. The land resisted easy settlement, crops failed, droughts came without mercy, floods followed, but slowly towns formed. Sheep and cattle stations expanded. Gold discoveries in the 19th century transformed Australia almost overnight, drawing migrants from around the world and laying the foundation for a modern economy. Still, nature remained the dominant force. Australia is a land of extremes. It holds some of the driest deserts on Earth and some of the most intense rainfall events. Temperatures can soar above 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the outback, while snow falls in the Australian Alps. Cyclones batter the north. Bushfires reshape entire regions. Droughts stretch on for years, then break suddenly, explosively. These extremes are not anomalies, they are the pattern. At the heart of Australia lies the outback, a vast interior that challenges every assumption about habitability. Sparse rainfall, nutrient-poor soils, and relentless heat make large-scale agriculture nearly impossible. Yet life persists. Reptiles regulate their body temperatures with precision. Plants like spinifex grass anchor shifting sands. Seeds lie dormant for years, waiting for a single rain event to trigger explosive growth. Water defines everything here. Rivers like the Murray and Darling support millions of people, but they are fragile systems, shaped by climate variability and human demand. Groundwater stored in ancient aquifers, some millions of years old, sustains remote communities and ecosystems. When water disappears, life contracts. When it returns, the land erupts with green almost overnight. This boom and bust cycle shaped not just ecosystems, but human psychology. Australians learned to expect uncertainty, to prepare, adapt, and laugh in the face of hardship. It's part of the national character, a quiet resilience born from living on a continent that never promises comfort. Along the coasts, a different world unfolds. Australia is ringed by oceans that teem with life. The Great Barrier Reef, the largest living structure on Earth, stretches over 1,400 miles. It is visible from space, yet heartbreakingly fragile. Built by billions of tiny coral polyps over thousands of years, the reef supports an astonishing diversity of life: fish, turtles, sharks, and countless organisms still being discovered. But warming oceans have pushed the reef to the brink. Mass coral bleaching events, driven by rising sea temperatures, have killed large portions of coral in just a few decades. Scientists warn that without significant global action, much of the reef could be lost within this century. What happens here is not just Australia's problem. It is a warning signal for the entire planet. And yet hope persists. Marine protected areas, indigenous sea management, and cutting-edge research offer pathways forward. Once again, ancient knowledge and modern science find themselves working side by side. Australia today stands at a crossroads. It is a wealthy nation built on natural resources, deeply tied to coal, gas, and mining, yet uniquely vulnerable to climate change. Bushfires have grown larger and more destructive. Heat waves last longer. Floods hit harder. Communities are forced to reconsider how and where they live. At the same time, Australia is redefining itself culturally. Modern Australia is one of the most multicultural societies on Earth. Waves of immigration have brought new languages, foods, and perspectives. Cities like Sydney and Melbourne consistently rank among the world's most livable, balancing innovation with access to nature. Art, film, and literature increasingly grapple with identity, history, and reconciliation. And at the center of that conversation is a growing recognition of indigenous sovereignty and knowledge. For tens of thousands of years, Australia was managed sustainably without fences, roads, or industrial tools. Today, that wisdom is being re-examined not as nostalgia, but as necessity. Fire management, water stewardship, and ecological balance are no longer abstract ideas. They are survival strategies. As we continue this journey, we will travel deeper into Australia's wild places and human stories. We will explore its animals, its oceans, its deserts, and its cities. We will confront its challenges honestly and celebrate its ingenuity openly. Because Australia is not just a land apart. It is a test case, a continent that shows us what isolation creates, what extremes demand, and what resilience truly means. And this is only the beginning. As the sun climbs higher over Australia, the continent reveals another of its truths. Nothing here exists in isolation. Every species, every river, every human story is part of a tightly woven system shaped by distance, climate, and time. To move deeper into Australia is to understand how life survives not by dominance, but by balance, and how easily that balance can be disrupted. Australia's wildlife is often described as dangerous, even hostile. Snakes, spiders, sharks, jellyfish. The list has become almost a cultural joke, but this reputation misses the deeper reality. These animals are not aggressive by nature. They are specialists, finely tuned to environments where mistakes are costly. Venom, camouflage, speed, these are tools of efficiency, not malice. Take the inland taipan, often called the world's most venomous snake. It lives in remote, sparsely populated regions and avoids confrontation whenever possible. Its venom evolved not to attack humans, but to subdue fast-moving prey quickly in extreme heat. In a land where energy is precious, efficiency is survival. The same logic applies across the continent. Kangaroos conserve water by producing highly concentrated urine. Wombats dig extensive burrow systems that moderate temperature and provide refuge for other species during fires. Even birds like the emu are adapted for endurance, capable of traveling long distances across dry landscapes in search of food and water. Nowhere is Australia's evolutionary uniqueness more visible than in its monotremes. The platypus and the echidna are living reminders that evolution does not follow straight lines. The platypus hunts using electroreception, sensing the tiny electrical impulses of prey underwater. It has venomous spurs, lays eggs, produces milk, and yet lacks nipples. It should not exist, and yet it does, perfectly adapted to its ecological niche. But wildlife here has not evolved in isolation forever. Around 50,000 years ago, humans arrived with new technologies and hunting strategies. Many of Australia's megafauna disappeared soon after: giant kangaroos, massive wombat-like creatures, and enormous flightless birds. Scientists continue to debate the precise causes, but the combination of human pressure and climate change likely tipped fragile systems beyond recovery. This pattern would repeat itself centuries later. When Europeans introduced animals like rabbits, foxes, and cats, the impact was catastrophic. Without natural predators, rabbits multiplied rapidly, stripping vegetation and accelerating erosion. Foxes and feral cats preyed on native species that had never evolved defenses against such hunters. Today, Australia has one of the highest rates of mammal extinction in the world. In response, conservation efforts have grown more ambitious and more urgent. Fenced sanctuaries, predator control programs, and large-scale land restoration projects aim to give native species a fighting chance. Indigenous ranger programs now manage millions of acres, blending traditional knowledge with modern science to protect biodiversity. Fire, once a tool, became a threat. For tens of thousands of years, controlled burns maintained mosaic landscapes, reducing fuel loads and encouraging regeneration. Colonization disrupted these practices. Fire suppression allowed vegetation to accumulate, setting the stage for catastrophic bushfires. In recent decades, rising temperatures and prolonged drought have intensified fire seasons, culminating in events that shocked the world. The fires of 2019 and 2020 burned an area larger than many countries, killing or displacing an estimated 3 billion animals. Smoke circled the globe. Skis turned orange. Communities were cut off with little warning. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Australia, but for a planet increasingly shaped by climate extremes. And yet even here, regeneration followed. Certain plants require fire to germinate, seeds sealed in resin cracked open by heat. New growth emerged from blackened soil within weeks. Life returned, fragile but determined. Fire was not the enemy, mismanagement was. Along Australia's northern coast, another ancient force shapes life: the monsoon. Seasonal rains transform dry landscapes into wetlands teeming with birds, fish, and crocodiles. The saltwater crocodile, the largest living reptile on Earth, dominates these waterways. Revered and feared, it is a relic of deep time, a species that has changed little since the age of dinosaurs. These northern regions remain among the most culturally intact indigenous landscapes in Australia. Remote, rugged, and deeply connected to ancestral law, they offer a glimpse of continuity rare in the modern world. Here, art is not decoration, it is record-keeping. Rock paintings tens of thousands of years old depict animals long extinct, preserving ecological history in pigment and stone. Offshore, Australia's oceans tell another story of abundance and fragility. The Great Barrier Reef is only one part of a vast marine domain. Southern waters host giant kelp forests. The Ningaloo Reef in Western Australia offers one of the few places on Earth where whale sharks can be encountered close to shore. Migrating humpback whales pass Australia's coastlines in numbers that were unimaginable just decades ago, a rare conservation success story. These recoveries show what is possible when pressure is reduced and ecosystems are given space to heal. Human society, too, continues to evolve. Australia's cities are young by global standards, but they are dynamic and influential. Melbourne's laneways pulse with art and music. Sydney's harbour blends natural beauty with architectural ambition. Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide each reflect different relationships with climate, geography, and history. At the same time, regional and remote communities face unique challenges. Access to healthcare, education, and employment remains uneven. Mining brings wealth but also environmental and social cost. Water allocation pits agriculture against ecosystems. These tensions are not theoretical. They shape daily life and national debate. In recent years, conversations about identity have grown louder and more honest. Recognition of past injustices, debates over constitutional acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples, and efforts toward reconciliation are reshaping Australia's sense of itself. This is not a simple process. It is ongoing, emotional, and necessary. Australia's future will not be defined by a single choice or moment. It will be shaped by how it balances prosperity with preservation, growth with restraint, and innovation with humility. The continent has always demanded adaptation. Now, it demands responsibility. As we move into the final part of this journey, we will step back and look forward, toward Australia's place in a changing world, its role in climate solutions, and the deeper lesson this ancient land offers to humanity as a whole. Because Australia is more than a destination. It is a warning, a guide, and a possibility. As the day fades across Australia, light softens over the continent, revealing its final lesson, that endurance is not about resisting change, but learning how to live within it. Shadows stretch across deserts older than memory. Coastal winds carry salt and warmth. In the quiet moments between extremes, Australia speaks most clearly. This land has never promised stability. Over millions of years, Australia drifted, dried, burned, flooded, and adapted. Its ecosystems learned to expect disruption. Its people, ancient and modern, were shaped by that same uncertainty. And now, in an era where human influence reaches every corner of the planet, Australia stands as both witness and warning. Climate change is no longer an abstract future here. It is lived reality. Rising temperatures push ecosystems closer to their limits. Heat waves test human health and infrastructure. Coral reefs struggle to recover between bleaching events. Species already living at the edge of tolerance have nowhere left to retreat. The margin for error is shrinking. Yet Australia is also a place of innovation. Researchers develop fire-resilient building designs. Farmers experiment with regenerative agriculture, restoring soil health while producing food. Indigenous land management practices are being reintroduced at scale, reducing fire risk and strengthening ecosystems. Renewable energy projects spread across sun-drenched plains and windswept coasts, positioning Australia as a potential global leader in clean energy. These are not isolated efforts. They are part of a broader realization that the continent's survival has always depended on working with nature, not against it. Australia's relationship with water offers a powerful example. After decades of overuse and mismanagement, river systems reached crisis points. In response, water-sharing agreements, environmental flows, and basin-wide reforms began to restore some balance. Progress is uneven, contested, and fragile, but it demonstrates that course correction is possible. The same applies to conservation. From the reintroduction of locally extinct species to ambitious efforts to protect half of Australia's landmass, the country is experimenting with scale. Success is never guaranteed, but inaction is no longer an option. The stakes are too high and the losses too visible. Australia's cities are changing as well. Urban planning increasingly accounts for heat, water scarcity, and population growth. Green spaces expand. Coastal defenses are reconsidered. Architects design for ventilation rather than air conditioning alone. These adjustments reflect an understanding long embedded in indigenous cultures. That place matters, and ignoring it comes at a cost. Perhaps the most profound shift is cultural. Australia is slowly learning to tell its story more completely, to acknowledge that the continent was not discovered but encountered, that its history did not begin with colonization but extends tens of thousands of years deeper. This recognition does not erase the past, it reframes the future. Listening becomes as important as leading. Elders share knowledge refined over millennia. Scientists bring data and models. Together, they reveal patterns invisible to either alone. Fire behaves differently in different landscapes. Animals move according to subtle seasonal cues. The land communicates if one is willing to pay attention. Australia teaches patience. Change here is rarely instant. Recovery takes time. Trust takes longer. But the continent itself is proof that resilience is built over ages, not moments. Even after catastrophe, life returns altered, scarred, but persistent. Standing beneath a vast southern sky, it becomes clear why Australia inspires such deep attachment. The scale humbles. The silence sharpens awareness. The extremes strip away illusion. There is no pretending control here, only participation. And this may be Australia's greatest gift to the world. In a century defined by uncertainty, Australia shows what it means to adapt without forgetting, to innovate without abandoning roots, to confront limits without surrendering hope. It reminds us that survival is not about dominance, but relationship. The future written here will not belong to Australia alone. The decisions made on this continent about energy, land, water, and culture will echo far beyond its shores. Because the challenges Australia faces today are the challenges the world will face tomorrow. As night settles and stars emerge, ancient constellations reappear, the same ones used for navigation thousands of years ago. The land rests, not because it is finished, but because it endures. Australia remains what it has always been, a continent apart, a mirror held up to humanity, asking not what we can take, but what we are willing to learn. And the answer, as always, is still unfolding.